Quick one. Did you notice last week I forgot to film in 4K and that I filmed in 1080p instead? If you did notice, I apologize. I forgot I had it in 1080p because I was doing slow motion video when I was doing those commercial projects and other stuff that I'm filming here as well. But I've made sure that now it is in 4K, and moving forward they will all be in 4K again. But for this week I want to talk about a topic that probably doesn't get discussed enough amongst photographers. I mean, we like to talk about many things, whether a particular brand is better than one another, the megapixels, our composition, our focal range, shutter speed, ISO, blah 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 blah. There's 50 million things we love to debate, but all of these are probably a moot point unless we all factor in one very important thing, and that's the light. And it's not just how much light we have, but the direction of light. Towards the end, I'll show a few examples of how this can affect you as a landscape photographer, but this affects all photography genres, not just landscape, but portrait, product, commercial, real estate, whatever it may be. Not just the amount of light you've got, but the direction of light will play a huge factor in how your photos, and even videos for that matter, look. And let me show you exactly what I mean. Right now, I've set up everything around me to a specific brightness level to match the exposure that I need when I'm filming these videos. I've got an LED light here at about 30 odd degree angle, and I've got a new blue LED light that's now sitting on the side here at a certain brightness, just to fill in a little bit of light on the side. And for some accent, I've got a bar sitting above my monitor that right now is set to warm color mode instead of cool color mode. Yes, warm instead of cool. Let's just focus on the brightness for now, then we'll do the directional afterwards. If I was to turn up this light on the right of me to an even brighter setting, everything in this video that you see would become massively overexposed. And I would have to find ways to reduce that in my video editing software, and hope that some of the detail is still there. Because if you massively overexpose something, your sensor will just regard everything as white, and you probably won't get any details back. But on the other side of the spectrum, if I was to turn the light down, everything would become massively underexposed, and then I would have to turn the brightness up in my post-processing software and hope that there is enough detail in the darkness and the shadows to at least try and recover something, but that the video quality itself also doesn't look too bad. So that shows how the amount of light you've got will affect your image and what you will have to do in post-processing. But at least this shows you how whether you have too much light or not enough light will affect the brightness of your image. But more important than that, it's actually the direction of the light as well, because that will determine how your image is going to look and what sort of post-processing you may have to do, or just bin it completely if you're trying to save it. As I mentioned earlier, I've got a light here on the right side that's about 30 degrees to my right. And from what you can see, this side of my face is relatively well lit, and on this side there's a few shadows, especially along the nose and here around my eyeballs, if you can see my eyeballs. Although if I were to move the light to right in front of me, you can see it's a very different look. It's very flat, there's no more shadows because there's no direction to the light, it's literally just right in front. And all the shadows that were on my nose are now gone, and you can't see any texture or depth to my face because there's no shadows to give the impression of texture and depth. If I were to put the light on just one side of my face, you can see this side of the face has now become very bright. There's a few shadows around the eyes, but this side of the face is now very dark and you can't see that much detail, if any at all. So if you were to try and balance it in post-processing, whether it's a photo or a video, you would have a lot of work to do to try and balance the two up, but then also add in the shadows to create the depth and the texture that you would have if you had it at the 30 degree angle that we've got right now. Now, if I were to light myself from the bottom, you can see that there are a lot of shadows everywhere that sticks further back than where my chin is. So my eyes have become very dark, my mouth is a little bit dark, and the top of my head is very dark, and only some parts are properly well lit, but they are very bright and it's hard to see the detail. But then at the same time, the parts that don't have any light don't have any detail at all, or at least very little detail. And it's the same as if I were to light myself from the top. The top of my head is very bright, and considering I don't have that much hair right now, you'd expect that it's going to be reflecting everything. But at the same time, there's lots of shadows under my eyes, or at least under my eyebrows, under my nose, but everything else is very bright, except where the shadows are. But there's a huge difference between the bright parts and the dark parts. So you can see how just having the light from either the top, the bottom, or directly on the side changes the way the image will look massively, regardless of the brightness, because that way you'll see whether you've got lots of light on one side, when not a lot of detail because it's really bright, and really dark on the other side, and also not a lot of detail because it's very dark. Which one's a scarier look actually, the one from the bottom or the one from the top? Let me know in the comments below, I'm curious to see your opinion on it. And this doesn't just apply to portrait photography. If you look at product photographers, like one of my favorite ones is Carl Taylor, he has lights coming from every angle to make sure whatever he's taking a picture of is lit up properly so that there's less post-processing work to do. It's a little bit more time to set it up and get it all right at the beginning, but it means that he doesn't have to play around with the lighting in Photoshop when he does to try and fix it later on. And no, Carl Taylor didn't pay me to say that. I just think he knows his stuff when it comes to using light, shaping light, and directing light, and it's a perfect example of how light can change how an object is going to look. So how would it affect you if you're a landscape photographer like myself? Because even though I'm in Bangkok in a big ass city, I'm still a landscape photographer at heart. Well, I've got a couple of examples here from Sydney from when I was still there to show you, from when I was doing sunsets around the harbor. The first one, you can see the sun is setting behind the harbor bridge, and whilst I have exposed for the rest of the image properly, if you look at the sun directly, it's bright white. And there is no detail whatsoever in the sun. No matter how much you try and bring it back, you can drop the exposure down by Lightroom's 4 or 5 stops. You can lower the highlights as much as you want, but it's still just pure white. And that's because the camera sensor, all camera sensors will do this. If it's pure white, it hasn't reported any data except white. So no matter how much you reduce the exposure or the highlights, you're not going to get anything back that's just white. Now, I could have fixed this by doing a separate exposure just for the sun and tried blending it in together, which I did try, and honestly, I didn't like it, so I just binned it. I don't mind the fact that the sun is completely bright white in this case because it's such a small part of the image and it doesn't affect any other part of the image that it's a non-issue for me. But this is also true for the opposite, where I've got this picture here of the Opera House from when I was testing the Nissin Night Filter. And you can see in this small part of the Opera House, or behind it, the trees are completely black, or at least very close to it. And even if I raise the exposure all the way up to 4 or 5 stops that Lightroom will let me, and also raise the shadows as much as Lightroom will let me, I do get some of the detail back because camera sensors are very good at picking up stuff that's in the shadows and in the dark parts. But as you can see, it's now very noisy, very grainy, and I can't even look at it anymore. It's disgusting. So I could have done that as well. Like, with the sunset one, I could have done a separate exposure just for the trees to make sure that they were visible and then blended it in. But I actually like it in this image how they are almost completely black because it shows that's actually a dark part of the area, which is legitimately true. If you looked at the Opera House from that part of Sydney at that time of night, or any time of night for that matter, you can't see the detail in the trees because it's just too dark up there. I don't even remember how many lights they have, but it's close to none. So it's a bit of a shorter one today. But I do hope that now you can see that not just how much light you've got, but also the direction of light will affect how your photos and videos are going to look and how you can manipulate them as you wanted to. As a prime example, I've got this blue LED light here that if I wanted to, I can just move it. And now the bottom of my face is blue, or I can put it a bit closer and it's a bit brighter, but you see it in the shot and I don't want that. So I'll put it over there where it's out of the way but still provides enough light. If you do have any questions about this, I hope I've covered everything so that you know exactly what I mean when I say not just the amount but the direction of light will play a factor. Leave a question in the comments below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But if you have liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up. That does help a lot because it tells YouTube you've liked this video and it will then show it to other people who may benefit from this video as well. And if you want to see what's coming up next week, because I don't see why I wouldn't be here next week, I'm not planning on disappearing for 2 months again, hit that subscribe button and tick that little bell so you get a notification whenever a new video is released. I'm starting to stutter like no tomorrow, so I'll leave it there for now and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one.